So, team, I'm going to start this podcast by saying something that probably is very difficult for a lot of you to understand. And I'm coming from a long history of a family with eating disorders, drug use, all kinds of different crazy stuff. So, I've been there, I've done that, but this is in regards to food. Let's get this straight and let's get this right. Well, never straight, but let's get this right from the beginning. There is absolutely no food that is bad for you. Let me repeat this again. There is absolutely no food that is bad for you. And not a single food will make you fat and will make you gain weight. Now, where we get in trouble and where we gain weight, when we gain fat, when we get liver disease, when we get different things that are going on in our body, illnesses in our body, it is the amount of food that we eat or the amount of certain foods that we eat, and when we limit foods that are good for us. Let me tell you that again. It is when we eat too much of the wrong foods, and then we don't eat enough of the good foods. Now, there is an alternative to this, though. There are foods that are more conducive to weight loss. In this podcast, I dive deep into it. My name is CJ. This is Evolve Strong with CJ, and I help you lose 10 pounds and 5 inches on your waist in 28 days, guaranteed. So listen up. Let's just be real. I grew up, and my mom at one point was 5'4" and over 400 pounds. Let me repeat that again. CJ Chavis's mom was at one point 5'4" and over 400 pounds. My mother's way of handling her stresses were by eating them away. I remember very vividly growing up where it would be in the middle of the night and I'd hear potato chip bags just completely ruffle, and by the morning they'd be gone. I see, just different wrappers all over. And I grew up in a home that had a lot of different issues. My, middle brother abused drugs considerably, used to beat the shit out of me. My dad lost his job when I was in elementary school. In fifth grade is when he lost his job. And we lived in a 2-bedroom trailer. And my mom was an educational assistant. At the time, actually, she was a bus driver, and then she became an educational assistant. So she was making maybe $4 or $5 an hour, supporting a family of 5. Think about that. That's when I actually learned my work ethic. That's when I typed up a little form and went throughout the neighborhood and said I'd mow your lawns every weekend for you. And I got like 6 or 7 clients on the weekends. Mr. Peckinpah, Ms. Beaver, Mr. Castillo. I had some great clients every single weekend. And I'd be working for it because my parents couldn't afford any of the good shoes because my feet would stink, with the Payless shoes. And I get picked on in middle school because I went to a completely different middle school because my mom didn't want me to follow the path of my middle brother. And so she put me into Cleveland, which was a very, uppity up at that point in time. It was a Heights school. Everybody's getting picked up in Mercedes Benz and BMWs. And my mom was picking me up in an old station wagon with full paneling that was falling off and was smoking in the back. So I get picked on. So that's actually where I, used to get into fights. And my mom said, if you're going to fight for real. So she put me in the martial arts academy. And at that point in time, I did trade because I knew they couldn't afford it. So, at first I afforded it. It was a small fee, but I would pay for it out of my own pocket with the money I made over the weekends, along with my shoes. And then I began to work, and then I began to work in the academy itself. And that's how I actually started my fighting career all the way up until 20. But that was my childhood. And I would not change it for the world. It made me who I am today. It is who I am today. And I'm super proud of it because only through that adversity have I been able to become the person I am. Now, my mom, on the other hand, because of all of the stresses with my middle brother on drugs, with my dad losing his job, and my mother now being an educational assistant, she began working on the weekends at Lane Bryant in the mall. I don't remember if you remember at Winrock. It was a plus size store. So on the weekends, she would work for on Saturdays and Sundays there. And then she started working at the Union Hall. And then, so she was working 3 jobs supporting our family. So no wonder she was using food as her stress relief. And she didn't use alcohol, she didn't use drugs, she didn't smoke, she didn't drink at the time. Now she loves her beer, but that's neither here nor there. And so she ended up 400 pounds, and she ended up she was only 5'4". At one point, she couldn't even walk. So how did she get to that point? How did she get to that point? My mom used to cook beans and potatoes, and we had the welfare cheese. We had great food in our home, and it was home cooked. It was New Mexican style home cooked food, and it was great food. Now, my oldest brother was a huge football star. He ended up going in the Air Force, but he was built like a rock. I myself, when I was fighting, I was a chunky kid. And then, I was a husky kid. And then when I started the martial arts academy is when I lost all my weight. And I was pretty fit, but I was eating the same food that everybody else was. And my dad was actually pretty fit too. He loved his Snickers and his Score and his sweet tooth. That's where I get it from. And he became diabetic eventually. And that's actually kind of what killed him, that and low testosterone. Because he had a heart attack at 40, and then he had another heart attack at 45, and then a bunch of different brain aneurysms after that. And then his quality of life just went to shit. So that's another reason why I'm here. But when we talk about food, there is absolutely no food that is bad for you. Even potato chips out of a bag. If you're at a picnic and you're partying and you have kids with you that love them, it could be very communal, very awesome. But it's when you buy the Costco huge ass bag and you eat that within one sitting, and then you're sitting sedentary at your office all darn day without any movement. That kind of habit, that kind of behavior is what gets you fat. A Snickers bar, it is a wonderful source of energy, especially after you've had a kick at, like think about Michael Phelps as an Olympic swimmer. That dude had to eat 20 to 25,000 calories a day. 20 to 25,000 calories a day. So it was pasta, it was potatoes, it was rice, it was lots of sweets, it was pizza. He had to consume a shitload of highly dense food. Now, here in New Mexico, which is rather interesting, but he was also a professional athlete. So he wasn't sitting around at a computer. He'd be moving all day. So there's purpose to the food. And when you're mindful and understanding of the purpose, fantastic. Now, we here in New Mexico, we have this thing called a tamale. And if you ever had the ingredients to a tamale, it basically is a shitload of lard and, basically cornmeal. Think about the nutrient density, the caloric density of one single tamale. And when we eat traditional foods here, we'll have 3 or 4 of those at one sitting. We're eating 2,000 to 3,000 calories in just one sitting. That tamale probably has anywhere between 400 to 600 calories each, and we're eating 3 or 4. Now, anthropologically speaking, the tamale was created by nomadic tribes that needed that nutrient-dense food in order to sustain their lifestyle. They were hunting buffalo, they were foraging, they were traveling, they were taking up and down their homes and traveling on the plains. Think about the nutrient density of that food and how much quality that actually had. During that time, it was absolutely critical. But today, it is one of the best nutrient dense foods if you are using it correctly. Does that make sense? So there is absolutely no food that is bad for you. There is none. Now, don't get me wrong. If your doctor says you have Hashimoto's or you got diabetes, you want to stay away from the sugars, I get that. But that's the vast majority of us. Special cases aside, there is no food that is bad for you. It is how we use it. Now, let's get away from that because you need to have that mindset before. Now, in order to use food for weight loss, you got to transition. Now, there are foods that are conducive to weight loss. There are foods that are much better for you, that are much more nutrient dense in regards to vitamins and essential nutrients and essential all that stuff that you need, right? Absolutely, there are. Think about the value of kale. Think about the value of broccoli. Think about the value of a lean protein, all essential amino acids to rebuild your muscles, right? So there are differences in quality of the food, especially for what you're needing. So if you're specifically looking for weight loss, what you want, what you want is what we call nutrient dense food that has low calories, and high nutrient value, meaning, and there's one chart. It's called a glycemic chart. And what this does, it puts inside the quantitative value of, not value, but the quality of food for weight loss, basically, or for hypoglycemia and stuff. The higher the glycemic value, it's really, it kind of, we get into the starches like the potatoes, the rices, the pastas. Those are carbohydrates which provide the energy resources for the body. Those ones really, what they'll do is if you're not burning those off in your system, in your stomach lining, if you're eating that kind of amount of calories and you're not burning them off. So if you eat a thing of pasta and then you go running a marathon, fantastic. But if you eat a big old bowl of pasta and then you go to bed and you're not burning it off, guess where it goes? Straight to the gut, straight to the ass, straight to the hips and thighs, right? So it's a moment on the lips and a lifetime on the hips. That is what I'm talking about in regards to being conducive for weight loss. So if you look at the glycemic index, this is a great chart. The lower the glycemic index, and the lower ones are like, cabbage. The lower ones are like tomatoes. The lower ones are like, broccoli. They're the stuff that you can basically eat right off the vine without having to process. They're fiber rich. So that means that when they're going through your gut, they'll clean it out and they'll come out in your poop a lot easier, right? And then they won't convert directly into energy that, again, eventually, if you're not burning it off, converts into stored fat. Also, guys, when you're also looking at your proteins or your fats, there are good fats. So what I was telling you earlier about the tamale, lard really is not a good fat for weight loss. It's a great fat for energy sources, but it's really not. Butter, kind of the same thing. Some of the fats are not equal, but like an avocado fat is fantastic. Olive oil fat is fantastic. Lean meats with the fat content in it are fantastic. You need those. A lot of our vitamins are fat soluble. Pardon me, guys. Just have a little bit of this cold. And then what you also want, guys, in regards to fat itself, you have polyunsaturated fat, saturated fat. You want the polyunsaturated fats. Those are the ones that have a higher chemical makeup, that are a lot more difficult for the body to break down, but it's also good for the body in regards to the necessity of it in order to convert or to transfer the vitamins in it, right? So everything has a purpose. But what you really want to do in regards to proteins, you want to have a leaner meat. So turkeys, chickens, bison, eggs are great sources of protein that have very low fat, right? Better than pork, better than, chicharrones, better than bacon, better than, hamburger meat. And if you're going to get hamburger meat, get a little bit, leaner. I don't like them because there's no fat in it. And if you're going to have a hamburger, have a good hamburger. Don't pussyfoot around. If you're going to cheat good, right? So does that make sense? Those are the type of foods that you want to look for. But the biggest thing, I could give you all kinds of hints and charts and, different things. You got to be mindful about what you're putting into your system. You got to actually know. Do you actually know the calories you're putting in on a daily basis? Do you happen to know what your macro distributions are? Do you happen to know exactly where you stand on a daily basis in regards to your metabolic rate so that you can make the decisions? And that is why a fundamental habit that I put into my clients' heads is you got to do your diet logging. If you don't do your diet logging, unfortunately, you'll never know where you're at. Never know where you're at, ever. Now, I'm 28 years into this industry. I know when I'm messing up and I know what I need to do in order to get there. But you, if you're trying to lose weight, number one deal, be mindful and start logging your food. Then you could start making the decisions necessary in order to lose the weight. That is the number one thing. And there's no food that's bad for you guys. Get that shit out of your head. Get it out of your head. There's no food that is bad for you. Now, if you're going to McDonald's every day and getting a Big Mac and sitting at your computer every day, that's bad. That's a habit. That's not food. That's a habit. And that's a habit we have to bring. I hope this was useful. If you have friends that would like this and would be benefit from it, please share it. I'd really appreciate that. If you want some more information with the services I provide, 505-591-4700, 505-591-4700. That is a text line. That is a voice line. Give me a call. Give me a text. All right. For my arch ears, remember, start strong, stay strong, always be evolve strong. Later, guys.